Earth was no longer the center of attention in the galaxy. For centuries, humanity had been overshadowed by advanced alien civilizations that soared across the stars with sleek ships and unimaginable technology. To these interstellar powers, Earth was little more than a quaint relic, a planet stuck in the past, full of people who still clung to outdated ways of life. The once mighty machines of war that had defined Earth's history now lay dormant, rusting away in forgotten bunkers deep beneath the surface. These relics were dismissed as useless junk by the aliens, who laughed at the idea that such primitive tools could ever pose a threat. Jacob Carter spent most of his days surrounded by these old war machines. He worked as a historian, cataloging artifacts from humanity's military past. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave him a sense of purpose. Jacob loved history, especially stories about Earth's wars, the battles fought not just for land or resources but for survival itself. In those tales he found inspiration. Humanity had always risen to meet its challenges, even when the odds seemed impossible. But lately, Jacob couldn't help feeling uneasy. The world around him felt stagnant, like humanity had given up on striving for greatness. His colleague, Lila Monroe, shared some of his passion. Unlike Jacob, though, she wasn't content to simply study the past. Lila was an engineer, and her hands itched to tinker with the old machines they uncovered. She saw potential where others saw scrap metal. Together, they made a good team. While Jacob documented the relics, Lila worked tirelessly to restore them, breathing new life into devices long thought dead. Their partnership was built on mutual respect and a shared curiosity about what might be possible if someone truly believed in Earth's potential again. One day, while exploring a hidden facility buried beneath the Nevada desert, Jacob and Lila stumbled upon something extraordinary. Deep within the labyrinth of tunnels, they discovered a massive chamber filled with rows of enormous machines. Some were covered in thick layers of dust, while others gleamed faintly under the dim lights, as if waiting patiently for their moment to shine. At the center of the room stood a towering structure, unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Its design was both familiar and alien, part tank, part spaceship, with sleek lines and ominous weaponry protruding from its frame. "What is this place?" Lila whispered, her voice echoing off the walls. Jacob stepped closer, running his fingers over the cold metal surface of the central machine. "I think we found something special," he said. "This must be one of the prototype weapons from Earth's golden age. I've read about projects like this, but I never imagined they actually existed." Lila examined the control panel embedded in the side of the machine. "It looks intact," she murmured. "If we can get it working, well, let's just say it might change things." The two of them spent weeks poring over schematics and testing systems. Slowly but surely, they began to bring the machine back to life. They learned that it was called Goliath, named after the biblical giant defeated by David. It had been designed during the height of Earth's Cold War era as a last resort, a weapon so powerful that its creators feared using it. Capable of firing projectiles at speeds unmatched by any modern technology, Goliath combined brute force with precision targeting. If used properly, it could obliterate entire fleets in moments. As they worked, tensions between Earth and the Zorathian Empire grew worse. The Zorathians were one of the most powerful alien factions in the galaxy, known for their arrogance and disdain for weaker species. They viewed Earth as little more than a curiosity, a backward planet unworthy of their time. During a diplomatic summit held aboard one of their starships hovering above Earth's atmosphere, Zorathian ambassadors openly mocked humanity's reliance on outdated technology. "You call yourselves warriors?" sneered Cale Vorn, a young ambassador with sharp features and an even sharper tongue. "Your greatest weapon wouldn't even scratch the hull of one of our cruisers." Jacob happened to be watching the broadcast from his office, his fists clenched, as he listened to Cale's words. Anger bubbled inside him, but it was quickly replaced by determination. He turned to Lila, who sat nearby tinkering with a circuit board. "They're wrong," Jacob said firmly. "We may not have their flashy gadgets, but we have something better. We have grit. We have ingenuity. And maybe, just maybe, we have Goliath." Lila looked up, her eyes narrowing. "You're thinking about using it, aren't you?" Jacob nodded. "If we don't try, we'll lose everything. This could be our chance to show them what Earth is really made of." Lila hesitated, then smiled. Faintly, "All right, let's do it. But if this goes sideways, I'm blaming you." Over the next few days, Jacob and Lila prepared Goliath for activation. They ran simulations, tested its systems, and made sure every component was functioning perfectly. Meanwhile, news reached Earth that the Zorathians were amassing their fleet near the outer edges of the solar system. Their leader, Emperor Thalric, announced his intention to annex Earth as a tribute world, deeming its people too weak to govern themselves. Panic spread across the globe as governments scrambled to prepare defenses, though everyone knew their current forces stood no chance against the Zorathian armada. Jacob approached Earth's military command with a bold proposal: allow him to take control of Goliath and use it against the invaders. At first, the generals dismissed him outright, calling his plan reckless and suicidal. But Jacob persisted, arguing that Goliath represented humanity's only hope. Finally, after much debate, they agreed, though reluctantly, to give him a chance. As Jacob and Lila finalized their preparations, they couldn't shake the weight of what they were about to do. This wasn't just a test run. It was a gamble, with the fate of their entire planet hanging in the balance. Yet despite the risks, they felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in years, Earth had a fighting chance, and it came in the form of a forgotten relic from its storied past. Little did they know, their actions would soon rewrite the course of history, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. Jacob and Lila stood in the dimly lit control room of the hidden Nevada facility, staring at the towering machine before them. Goliath loomed like a sleeping giant, its metallic surface gleaming faintly under the overhead lights. The air was thick with tension, but also with a quiet excitement. They had spent weeks repairing and testing the ancient weapon, and now it was finally ready to be awakened. Yet, as they prepared to activate it, doubts lingered in their minds. Was this the right thing to do? Could they really trust an old prototype to save Earth from annihilation? Lila broke the silence first. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She tightened her grip on the wrench in her hand, as if holding onto something solid would make the situation feel less overwhelming. Jacob hesitated before answering. He turned to look at her, his expression serious but resolute. "We don't have a choice," he said. "The Zorathians aren't going to stop. If we don't fight back, they'll crush us without a second thought. This might be our only chance." Lila nodded slowly, though her eyes still betrayed her unease. She glanced at Goliath again, taking in its massive frame and intimidating arsenal. It was hard to believe that such a relic could hold the key to humanity's survival. But then again, she reminded herself, history was full of moments when people had achieved the impossible against all odds. Maybe this was one of those moments. With a deep breath, Jacob stepped toward the control panel embedded in Goliath's side. His fingers hovered over the buttons for a moment, before he pressed the sequence to power up the machine. A low hum filled the room as Goliath's systems came online. Lights flickered across its surface, casting eerie shadows on the walls. For a brief second, both Jacob and Lila held their breaths, waiting to see if anything would go wrong. But the machine remained stable, responding perfectly to their commands. "It's working," Lila said, her voice tinged with awe. "It's actually working." Jacob allowed himself a small smile. "Let's not celebrate just yet," he cautioned. "We still need to move it into position." And we need to do it fast. They quickly got to work, coordinating their efforts to transport Goliath to a remote orbital platform disguised as a derelict satellite. The platform had been abandoned years ago, making it the perfect hiding spot. From there, they could monitor the approaching Zorathian fleet without being detected. It wasn't easy. Goliath was enormous, and moving it required precise calculations and careful maneuvering. But Jacob and Lila were determined, and they refused to let fatigue or fear slow them down. As they worked, news continued to pour in about the Zorathian invasion. Their fleet was growing larger by the hour, with reports estimating hundreds of ships heading toward Earth. Emperor Thalric's announcement had sent shockwaves through the planet, leaving people terrified and desperate. Governments issued evacuation orders, urging citizens to seek shelter underground. Cities went dark as power grids were shut down to minimize casualties. The skies, once filled with stars, now seemed ominous and foreboding. Back on Earth, Ethan Cole watched the chaos unfold from his apartment in Chicago. Ethan was a journalist who had spent years covering stories about humanity's struggles against alien threats. He had seen firsthand how fear could tear communities apart, but he had also witnessed moments of incredible bravery and resilience. Determined to capture the truth, Ethan grabbed his camera and headed out into the streets. The city was eerily quiet, its usual bustle replaced by an unsettling stillness. People huddled together in makeshift shelters, their faces pale with worry. Ethan approached a group of survivors gathered around a radio, listening intently to updates about the Zorathian fleet. One man, his voice trembling, recounted how his family had narrowly escaped an earlier alien attack. Another woman spoke about losing her home to invaders during a previous conflict. Ethan listened carefully, jotting down notes and snapping photos. These stories mattered. They were proof that humanity hadn't given up, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Later that night, Ethan uploaded his footage to a secure server, ensuring it would reach a global audience. His report painted a vivid picture of Earth's plight, capturing both the despair and the hope that lingered in the hearts of its people. As the video spread across social media platforms, it sparked a wave of reactions. Some viewers felt paralyzed by fear, while others found strength in the courage displayed by ordinary citizens. Ethan's words resonated deeply. We may be outnumbered, but we are not defeated. Humanity has faced darkness before, and we will rise again. Meanwhile, high above Earth, the Zorathian fleet arrived in full force. Their ships were sleek and menacing, each one bristling with advanced weaponry. Admiral Vrax Karin, a ruthless tactician known for his brutal efficiency, commanded the armada. His reputation preceded him. He had led countless campaigns against rebellious colonies, reducing them to ashes without hesitation. To him, Earth was nothing more than another target, a weak planet ripe for conquest. Cale Vorn, the young ambassador who had mocked Earth during the diplomatic summit, accompanied Admiral Vrax aboard the flagship. Cale smirked as he gazed at the blue-green orb below, his disdain evident. "This is what passes for a civilization," he sneered. "Pathetic. I almost feel sorry for them." Admiral Vrax chuckled darkly. "Don't waste your pity," he replied. "They'll soon learn their place. Prepare the fleet for bombardment. Let's show these primitives what real power looks like." Unbeknownst to the Zorathians, Jacob and Lila were watching silently from their perch on the orbital platform. Through a series of monitors, they observed the fleet's movements, analyzing its formation and calculating potential weak points. Goliath sat ready, its targeting systems primed for action. Despite their confidence in the machine, both Jacob and Lila felt a knot of anxiety twisting in their stomachs. They knew the stakes were unimaginably high if Goliath failed. Earth would fall. Jacob leaned closer to the screen, his eyes scanning the data streaming in. "They're getting closer," he muttered. "We need to time this perfectly." Lila nodded, her hands steady as she adjusted the controls. "I've set the firing sequence," she said. All we need is your command." For a moment, Jacob closed his eyes, steeling himself for what was to come. He thought about everything that had brought him to this point, the long hours spent studying Earth's military history, the countless nights tinkering with old machines, the unwavering belief that humanity could still achieve greatness. Now all of that effort boiled down to one critical decision. He opened his eyes and took a deep breath. "All right," he said firmly. "Let's show them what Earth is capable of." As the Zorathian fleet drew nearer, neither Jacob nor Lila could have predicted the impact their actions would soon unleash. The stage was set, the players in position, and the fate of Earth hung precariously in the balance. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: the galaxy would never look at Earth or its so-called relics the same way again. The orbital platform was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of Goliath's systems and the occasional beep of the control panel. Jacob and Leela sat side by side in the cramped command room, their eyes glued to the monitors displaying the Zorathian fleet. The enemy ships were now close enough to see clearly, each one a sleek, menacing silhouette against the blackness of space. Their formation was tight and disciplined, a testament to the precision of Admiral Vrax Korin's leadership. To anyone else, the sight would have been terrifying. But Jacob and Layla weren't just anyone they had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and they refused to let fear cloud their judgment. Jacob leaned forward, his fingers hovering over the firing controls. "They're almost in range," he said, his voice calm but tinged with tension. He glanced at Leela, who was busy monitoring Goliath's power levels. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, her hands moving swiftly across the keyboard as she adjusted settings. "How are the energy reserves?" Jacob asked, breaking the silence. Lila didn't look up. "Stable for now," she replied, "but we'll need to use it wisely. Once we start firing, there's no turning back." Jacob nodded, though he already knew what was at stake. Goliath wasn't designed for prolonged combat. Its power source was experimental, meant to deliver devastating bursts of energy rather than sustained firepower. If they wasted even a single shot, they might not get another chance. Every decision mattered, every second counted. On the monitors, the Zorathian fleet continued its steady advance. Admiral Vrax's flagship led the charge, its massive frame dwarfing the smaller cruisers flanking it. Cale Vorn stood on the bridge beside the Admiral, his smug expression unwavering. He gestured lazily toward Earth, visible as a pale blue orb in the distance. "Look at them," he sneered. "Cowering like insects. They don't even have the courage to fight back." Admiral Vrax chuckled darkly, his sharp features illuminated by the glow of the ship's tactical displays. "Why should they? They know resistance is futile. Let's give them something to remember us by." With a wave of his hand, the Admiral ordered the fleet to prepare for bombardment. Weapon systems powered up, glowing ominously as they locked onto Earth's atmosphere. Below, cities braced for impact, their inhabitants huddled in shelters or praying for salvation. No one knew that two people and an ancient relic were about to defy the odds. Back on the orbital platform, Jacob and Leela exchanged a final glance. There was no time left for hesitation. The Zorathians were within range, and Goliath was ready. Jacob placed his hand on the firing lever, his heart pounding in his chest. "Here goes nothing," he muttered under his breath. He pulled the lever. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening roar, Goliath unleashed its payload. Hypervelocity projectiles streaked through space, each one traveling faster than any weapon the Zorathians had ever encountered. The first salvo struck Admiral Vrax's flagship, tearing through its hull like paper. Explosions rippled across the massive vessel, sending chunks of molten metal spiraling into the void. Within moments, the once mighty ship was reduced to a burning wreck, its crew scrambling to escape before it collapsed entirely. The rest of the fleet scrambled to react, but chaos quickly spread through their ranks. More projectiles rained down, targeting key ships in the formation. Cruisers exploded in bursts of fire and debris, their advanced shields useless against the sheer speed and force of Goliath's attack. Alarms blared across the surviving vessels as panic set in. For the first time, the Zorathians experienced true fear. On the bridge of one of the remaining cruisers, Admiral Vrack stared in disbelief at the carnage unfolding before him. His flagship, the pride of the Empire, was gone, destroyed in mere seconds. How was this possible? Earth had no weapons capable of such destruction. And yet, here it was, happening right in front of his eyes. What is this? He demanded, his voice rising in anger. Where is the attack coming from? Cale Vorn, shaken out of his arrogance, stammered, I don't know, sir. It's invisible. Invisible wasn't quite accurate, but it was close enough. Goliath's cloaking mechanism, hastily activated by Lila moments before. The attack made it nearly impossible for the Zorathians to pinpoint its location. All they could see were the devastating results of its firepower, leaving them scrambling to defend themselves against an unseen enemy. Jacob watched the destruction unfold on the monitors, his jaw clenched tightly. Every explosion brought a mix of satisfaction and dread. He had dreamed of proving Earth's strength, of showing the galaxy that humanity wasn't weak. But seeing the reality of war, the sheer scale of death and destruction, was harder than he'd imagined. Still, he reminded himself why they were doing this. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. If they failed, Earth would be erased from existence. Lila noticed the conflicted look on Jacob's face and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We're doing the right thing, she said softly. This isn't just about us. It's about everyone down there. She gestured toward the distant image of Earth on one of the screens. Jacob nodded, forcing himself to focus. Let's finish this, he said, his voice firm once more. They continued firing, methodically picking off the largest and most dangerous ships in the Zorathian fleet. Each shot was precise, calculated to maximize damage while conserving Goliath's limited energy reserves. The Zorathians tried to retaliate, launching counterattacks in all directions. But without knowing where the shots were coming from, their efforts were futile. Their once unstoppable armada was crumbling, reduced to a scattering of damaged ships trying desperately to regroup. Below, on Earth, the effects of the battle were beginning to show. News outlets picked up footage of explosions in orbit, broadcasting live images of the Zorathian fleet being torn apart. At first, no one understood what was happening. Some assumed it was a malfunction in the invaders' own weapons, while others speculated that reinforcements had arrived from another alien faction. But as the truth slowly emerged that Earth itself was responsible, a wave of hope swept across the planet. Ethan Cole, still documenting the crisis from Chicago, witnessed the reaction firsthand. People gathered around televisions and radios, their faces lighting up with disbelief and joy. In the streets, chants of "Earth, Earth" echoed as survivors celebrated the unexpected turn of events. Ethan captured it all on camera, his lens focusing on the raw emotion in people's eyes. For the first time in days, there was a sense of unity, a shared belief that humanity still had a fighting chance. This changes everything, Ethan murmured to himself as he filmed the celebrations. He thought about Jacob and Lila, the unsung heroes behind the attack. Who were they? What had driven them to take such a bold stand? Ethan made a mental note to find out, vowing to tell their story to the world once the dust settled. Meanwhile, aboard the remnants of the Zorathian fleet, Admiral Vrack struggled to regain control of the situation. His forces were in disarray, their confidence shattered. Find the source of the attack, he barked, his voice shaking with rage. I want answers, and I want them now. Cale Vorn hesitated, unsure of what to say. He had mocked Earth's weakness only days earlier, dismissing its people as irrelevant. Now those same people had turned the tide of battle in a matter of minutes. The irony wasn't lost on him, and it stung worse than any physical wound. "We're running scans," one of the officers reported nervously. "But whatever it is, it's heavily cloaked. We can't get a lock." Admiral Vrax slammed his fist against the console, denting the metal surface. "Then widen the search. Use every resource at your disposal. I will not tolerate failure." As the Zorathians scrambled to locate Goliath, Jacob and Lila prepared for another round of attacks. The machine's power reserves were dwindling, and its systems were beginning to strain under the constant firing. Sweat dripped down Lila's forehead as she worked to keep everything stable, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Jacob, meanwhile, focused on targeting the next wave of ships, determined to make every shot count. "They're starting to scatter," Lila observed, pointing at the monitors. "Looks like they're trying to retreat." "Not yet," Jacob replied grimly. "We can't let them regroup. Not after what they've done." With a deep breath, Jacob fired again, unleashing another barrage of projectiles. The remaining Zorathian ships erupted in flames, their formations collapsing entirely. By the time the smoke cleared, only a handful of cruisers remained, limping away from the battlefield as fast as their damaged engines would allow. For a brief moment, Jacob allowed himself to relax. They had done it. They had turned the tide of the battle. But as he glanced at the readouts on the control panel, his relief quickly turned to concern. Goliath's power levels were dangerously low, and its cloaking mechanism was flickering. If the Zorathians managed to trace the residual heat signatures left by the attacks, they would find the orbital platform and Goliath in no time. "We need to move," Jacob said urgently. Now, Lila didn't argue. Together, they began shutting down non-essential systems, preparing to relocate Goliath before it was too late. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. And as long as the Zorathians still breathed, Earth's survival remained uncertain. The orbital platform was no longer a safe haven. Jacob and Lila worked feverishly to shut down Goliath's systems, their movements quick but deliberate. The machine had done its job. It had ripped through the Zorathian fleet like a storm butt. Now it was vulnerable. Its power reserves were nearly depleted, and the cloaking mechanism that had hidden them from the enemy was beginning to fail. If they didn't act fast, the Zorathians would find them. "We're running out of time," Lila said, her voice tense as she scanned the monitors. A blinking warning light on the control panel indicated that Goliath's heat signature was spiking. It wouldn't be long before the Zorathians detected it. Jacob nodded, his hands moving swiftly over the controls. "I'm shutting down the firing systems. That should buy us a few minutes." He glanced at the screen showing the remnants of the Zorathian fleet. Most of the ships had fled, but a small squadron of fighters was still lingering nearby, likely searching for the source of the attack. "They're onto us." Lila clenched her jaw. "Then we need to move Goliath. If they find this platform, we're finished." Moving Goliath wasn't going to be easy. The machine was enormous, and the orbital platform had been designed for concealment, not mobility. Still, they didn't have a choice. Jacob accessed the navigation controls, inputting a new trajectory for Goliath to follow. The plan was risky. They would detach the platform from its current position and use Goliath's thrusters to propel it into deeper space. It was a desperate move, but it might give them enough distance to stay hidden. "Ready?" Jacob asked, glancing at Lila. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, her hands hovering over the auxiliary controls. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Let's do this." With a final keystroke, Jacob initiated the maneuver. The platform shuddered violently as Goliath's engines roared to life, propelling the massive machine away from its original location. Alarms blared as the platform's structural integrity began to weaken under the strain, but Jacob ignored them, focusing solely on getting Goliath to safety. The two of them held on tightly as the platform broke free from its moorings. and drifted into the void. Behind them, the Zorathian fighters closed in. Their scanners had picked up the heat spike, and they were homing in on the signal. Admiral Vrax, aboard one of the surviving cruisers, barked orders to his crew. "Find them!" he shouted, his voice laced with fury. "Destroy whatever is left of that weapon." Cale Vorn stood nearby, his earlier arrogance replaced by fear. He had underestimated Earth, and now, because of his mockery, the Zorathian Empire faced its first real defeat in decades. He clenched his fists, vowing silently to make humanity pay for their defiance. As Goliath moved farther away from the battlefield, Jacob and Leela monitored the pursuing fighters. The Zorathians were gaining ground, their advanced technology giving them an edge in speed and agility. Jacob cursed under his breath, knowing they couldn't outrun the enemy indefinitely. Goliath's engines were already strained from the earlier attacks, and its cloaking system was barely holding together. "We can't keep running," Lila said, her voice tight with worry. "We need to do something, or they'll catch us." Jacob stared at the monitors, his mind racing. They had only one option left, a final stand. Goliath still had enough power for one last attack, but using it would leave them completely defenseless. If they missed, they would be sitting ducks. Yet, if they hit their mark, they might just have a chance to survive. "Here's the plan," Jacob said, turning to Leela. "We'll lure them into range and hit them with everything we've got. It's risky, but it's our best shot." Layla hesitated, then nodded. "All right, let's end this." Jacob adjusted Goliath's course, deliberately slowing its pace to allow the Zorathian fighters to close the gap. The enemy ships fell for the trap, accelerating toward their prey. As they drew closer, Jacob activated Goliath's targeting systems, locking onto the lead fighter. His hands trembled slightly as he prepared to fire, but he forced himself to stay focused. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. Now! Jacob shouted, pulling the firing lever. Goliath unleashed its final barrage, sending a wave of hypervelocity projectiles hurtling toward the Zorathian squadron. The shots tore through the fighters with devastating precision, obliterating them. In a matter of seconds, explosions lit up the darkness of space, scattering debris in every direction. For a brief moment, there was silence as the dust settled. "They're gone," Lila whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. She stared at the monitors, watching as the remaining Zorathian ships retreated, their formations broken and their morale shattered. Jacob slumped back in his seat, exhaustion washing over him. They had done it. They had destroyed the squadron and bought themselves some time. But the victory came at a cost. Goliath's systems were now completely drained, its engines sputtering as it drifted aimlessly through space. The cloaking mechanism flickered and died, leaving them exposed. "We need to get help," Leela said, breaking the silence. "If more Zorathians come, we won't last long." Jacob nodded, though he knew reaching Earth wouldn't be easy. They were stranded in deep space, far from any communication relays or rescue teams. Still, they couldn't give up, not after everything they had sacrificed to get this far. On Earth, news of the battle spread like wildfire. Ethan Cole's footage of the explosions in orbit had gone viral, sparking celebrations across the planet. People gathered in streets and squares, cheering for the heroes who had saved them from certain doom. No one knew who was responsible for the attack, but rumors swirled about a secret weapon and the brave individuals who had wielded it. Ethan continued documenting the reaction, capturing the hope and determination that had taken root in humanity's collective spirit. "This changes everything," Ethan muttered to himself as he filmed a crowd chanting, "Earth, Earth," in unison. He thought about Jacob and Leela again, the mysterious figures behind the attack. Whoever they were, they had given humanity a fighting chance. And for the first time in years, people believed in the possibility of victory. Back aboard, the surviving Zorathian cruiser, Admiral Vrax, seethed with rage. His once mighty fleet had been reduced to a handful of damaged ships, and his flagship was nothing more than a burning wreck. The humiliation burned deeper than any wound. He turned to Cale Vorn, his eyes blazing with fury. "You mocked them." Vrax growled. "You called them weak. And now look what they've done." Cale swallowed hard, unable to meet the Admiral's gaze. "Sir, Enough," Vrax snapped. "We will regroup. We will rebuild. And when we return, we will crush them utterly." Despite the setback, the Zorathians weren't defeated. They retreated to regroup, plotting their next move. But for now, Earth was safe, a fact that brought both relief and unease to Jacob and Lila as they drifted through the cold emptiness of space. "We did it," Leela said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was tinged with pride, but also sadness. They had accomplished the impossible, but at what cost? Goliath was spent, its power reserves exhausted. And they were alone, floating in the vastness of space with no way to call for help. Jacob placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. "We gave Earth a chance," he said. "That's all we could do." For a long while, neither of them spoke. They simply sat there, staring out at the stars, their hearts heavy with the weight of what they had done. They had fought for humanity, for a future where Earth could stand tall among the stars. Whether they survived to see that future remained uncertain, but they had faith that others would carry the torch. As the hours passed, Jacob and Lila worked tirelessly to repair Goliath's systems, hoping to restore enough functionality to send a distress signal. It was a daunting task, made harder by their dwindling supplies and the harsh conditions of space. But they refused to give up. They had come too far to surrender now. Far below, on Earth, the celebrations continued. People danced in the streets, sang songs of triumph, and dreamed of a brighter tomorrow. Ethan Cole watched it all unfold, his camera capturing every moment. He felt a surge of pride as he realized the impact of what had happened. Humanity had faced the brink of extinction, and somehow, against all odds, it had prevailed. But as the sun set on a world reborn, Jacob and Leela remained adrift, their fate hanging in the balance. The galaxy had changed forever, thanks to their courage and sacrifice. And though their story was far from over, one thing was certain: Earth would never forget the day its old war relics proved stronger than anyone had imagined. The silence in space was deafening. Jacob and Lila sat in the dimly lit control room of Goliath, their faces pale and drawn from exhaustion. The machine that had saved Earth now lay lifeless, its systems drained and its engines sputtering weakly. They were stranded, floating aimlessly in the vast emptiness between stars. Every attempt to repair Goliath's communication systems had failed, leaving them with no way to call for help. The weight of their situation pressed down on them like a physical force. "We can't give up," Jacob said finally, breaking the long stretch of silence. His voice was hoarse, but his determination hadn't wavered. "There has to be something we haven't tried yet." Leela rubbed her temples, her hands trembling slightly from fatigue. She glanced at the monitors, which displayed nothing but static and error messages. "We've been at this for hours," she replied, her tone heavy with frustration. "Every system is fried. Even if we could send a signal, who's going to hear us out here?" Jacob clenched his jaw, refusing to let despair take hold. He stared at the blinking lights on the control panel, as if sheer willpower could bring Goliath back to life. "We have to keep trying," he insisted. "If we stop now, everything we did, everything we sacrificed, it'll all be for nothing." Lila sighed but nodded reluctantly. She knew Jacob was right. Giving up wasn't an option, not when so many lives depended on their survival. With renewed resolve, she turned back to the task at hand, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she rerouted power to the auxiliary systems. Sparks occasionally shot out from overloaded circuits, forcing her to duck or shield her face. Still, she pressed on, determined to find a solution. Hours passed, each one stretching longer than the last. The temperature inside Goliath began to drop, and both Jacob and Layla wrapped themselves in thin emergency blankets, scavenged from storage compartments. Their breaths formed faint clouds in the cold air, but neither complained. They were too focused on their work to notice the discomfort. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Leela let out a sharp gasp. "I think I've got something," she exclaimed, her voice cracking with excitement. On one of the monitors, a faint signal flickered to life, a distress beacon. It wasn't strong enough to reach Earth directly, but it might attract the attention of nearby ships or satellites. Jacob leaned closer, his eyes wide with hope. "Can you amplify it?" he asked urgently. "I'll try," Lila replied, her hands moving quickly over the controls. She adjusted the frequency and boosted the power output, pushing the damaged systems to their limits. For a moment, it seemed like the signal would fail, sputtering into nothingness. But then, miraculously, it stabilized. "It's working," Lila whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "It's actually working." Jacob allowed himself a small smile, though his relief was short-lived. "Now we wait," he said grimly, "and pray someone picks up the signal." Meanwhile, on Earth, the celebrations had begun to die down as reality set in. People returned to their homes, exhausted but hopeful. The initial euphoria of victory gave way to questions about the future. Who had led the attack against the Zorathians? What had happened to the mysterious weapon that had turned the tide of battle? Speculation ran rampant, but no answers emerged. Ethan Cole continued documenting the aftermath, weaving together stories of resilience and courage. He interviewed survivors, scientists, and military officials, piecing together fragments of information, in hopes of uncovering the truth. His latest report focused on the unknown heroes behind the attack, calling them Guardians of Humanity. The phrase caught on quickly, inspiring murals, songs, and even makeshift memorials dedicated to the unnamed defenders to dot in a quiet corner of Chicago. Ethan reviewed footage of the orbital battle, zooming in on grainy images of explosions and debris. Something caught his eye, a faint outline of a massive object near the edge of the frame. It looked mechanical, almost like a ship, but its design didn't match any known Zorathian vessels. Ethan leaned closer, his heart racing. Could this be the weapon everyone was talking about? He replayed the footage several times, enhancing the image as much as possible. Though details remained blurry, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was onto something big. If this really was the weapon, and if its operators were still alive, they might hold the key to humanity's defense against future threats. Ethan uploaded his findings to a secure server, tagging it with keywords likely to draw attention from experts and investigators. "Whoever you are," he muttered under his breath, "we need to find you." Back aboard the surviving Zorathian cruiser, Admiral Vrax paced the bridge, his fury barely contained. The destruction of his fleet was a humiliation he couldn't stomach. He had spent decades building a reputation as an unstoppable commander, only to see it crumble in a single day. To make matters worse, Emperor Thalric had demanded answers Vrax didn't have. How could this happen? Vrax growled, glaring at Kale Vorn, who stood nervously nearby. A primitive planet with outdated weapons somehow managed to destroy our greatest armada. Explain that. Kale swallowed hard, avoiding the Admiral's gaze. "Sir, I don't know." "Whatever they used, it was unlike anything we've encountered before." Vrax slammed his fist against the console, denting the metal surface. "That's not good enough. We must find out what it was and eliminate it. If word of this defeat spreads, it will embolden every rebel faction in the galaxy." Kale nodded hastily. "Yes, sir. I'll ensure the remaining forces conduct a thorough search of the area. We won't rest until we locate the source of the attack," Vrax sneered. "See that you do. Failure will not be tolerated." As Kale hurried off to carry out the orders, Vrax turned his attention to the tactical display. The scattered remnants of the fleet were regrouping slowly, licking their wounds while preparing for another assault. But first, they needed to understand what had defeated them. Until then, Earth remained a dangerous mystery, one that Vrax intended to solve personally. Hours turned into days as Jacob and Lila waited anxiously for a response to their distress signal. The cold inside Goliath grew unbearable, forcing them to huddle together for warmth. Food supplies dwindled, and dehydration became a growing concern. Despite their worsening condition, they refused to lose hope. Then on the third day, a faint blip appeared on the radar screen. At first, Jacob thought it was a glitch, but the signal grew stronger with each passing second. A ship was approaching fast. "Is it one of ours?" Lila asked, her voice trembling with anticipation. Jacob squinted at the monitor, trying to identify the vessel. Its design was unfamiliar, sleek and angular, unlike anything in Earth's fleet. "I don't think so," he said cautiously. "But maybe, just maybe, it's friendly." The ship drew closer, its hull gleaming in the light of a distant star. As it came within range, a message crackled through the comm system. "Unidentified craft. This is the independent freighter Stellar Vanguard. Do you require assistance?" Jacob and Lila exchanged a glance, relief washing over them. Without hesitation, Jacob activated the comm link. "This is Jacob Carter aboard." Goliath," he said, his voice shaky but filled with gratitude. "We're stranded and in need of immediate aid." There was a pause before the reply came. "Understood, Goliath. Stand by for docking procedures. We'll bring you aboard." As the Stellar Vanguard maneuvered into position, Jacob and Lila prepared to leave the machine that had saved Earth. They stepped outside for the first time. In days, their legs weak from disuse. The sight of the freighter looming above them filled them with awe and gratitude. The crew of the Stellar Vanguard greeted them warmly, offering food, water, and medical care. Among them was Captain Mara Solis, a grizzled veteran with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She listened intently as Jacob and Lila recounted their story, her expression shifting from disbelief to admiration. "You two are heroes," Mara said finally, shaking her head in amazement. "What you did, it's incredible." Jacob shook his head modestly. "We just did what we had to do. Now we need to get back to Earth to warn them. The Zorathians won't stay away forever." Mara nodded solemnly. "Then we'll get you there as fast as we can. Rest up, you've earned it." As Jacob and Lila settled into the warmth and safety of the freighter, they allowed themselves a moment of peace. They had survived against impossible odds, but their journey was far from over. Earth still needed them, and they weren't about to let it down. Far away, the Zorathian fleet regrouped, plotting their revenge. Humanity's victory had been fleeting, a spark of defiance in a galaxy dominated by power. But Jacob and Lila knew one thing for certain: Earth was ready to fight, and it would never surrender without a struggle. The journey back to Earth aboard the Stellar Vanguard was a blur of exhaustion and relief for Jacob and Lila. After days of floating in the cold emptiness of space, they finally had time to rest, eat properly, and recover from their ordeal. But even as their bodies began to heal, their minds couldn't stop racing. The Zorathians were still out there, regrouping and planning their next move. Earth's victory had been temporary, a brief reprieve in what would surely become a larger war. Jacob and Lila knew they couldn't afford to relax, not when so much was at stake. Captain Mara Solis proved to be an invaluable ally. She listened intently as Jacob and Lila explained everything about Goliath, its origins, its capabilities, and the role it had played in defeating the Zorathian fleet. Mara's sharp eyes narrowed thoughtfully as she processed the information. "You two have done something extraordinary," she said finally. "But you're right, this isn't over. The Zorathians don't forgive easily." Jacob nodded grimly. They'll come back stronger next time. We need to prepare Earth for that, Mara agreed. Then we'll make sure your story reaches the right people. Humanity needs to know what happened and how close they came to losing everything. As the stellar vanguard approached Earth's orbit, Jacob and Lila stood by a viewport, staring at the blue-green planet below. It looked peaceful from this distance, its oceans shimmering under the sunlight. Yet they knew better than anyone how fragile it truly was. For all its beauty, Earth was still vulnerable, a fact that weighed heavily on both of them. When the freighter docked at a secure space station, a team of scientists and military officials greeted them. News of their arrival had spread quickly, thanks to Captain Solus's communications with Earth's leaders. Jacob and Lila were whisked away for debriefings, their every word recorded and analyzed. They recounted the battle against the Zorathians in detail, describing Goliath's power and the sacrifices they'd made to use it. By the time they finished, everyone in the room was silent, struggling to process the magnitude of what they'd heard. One of the generals broke the silence. "You've given us hope," he said solemnly. "But we can't rely on miracles forever. Goliath may have saved us this time, but we need to adapt if we want to survive." Lila spoke up, her voice firm despite her fatigue. "Goliath wasn't just a weapon, it was proof that humanity has the ingenuity to fight back. If we study its design, we can create new defenses. We can build something better." The general nodded slowly. "We'll start immediately. But first, you two deserve a break. You've earned it." Back on Earth, life began to return to normal, or as close to normal as possible after such a catastrophic event. Cities reopened, and people ventured outside, their faces reflecting a mix of gratitude and cautious optimism. The celebrations had quieted, replaced by a sense of purpose. Humanity had faced extinction and lived to tell the tale, and that knowledge inspired a newfound determination. Ethan Cole continued his work, piecing together the full story of Jacob and Lila's heroism. His reports became the foundation for a global movement, uniting people under a shared goal: to protect Earth no matter the cost. Murals depicting Goliath appeared on walls across the world, alongside portraits of Jacob and Lila. Their names became synonymous with courage and resilience, though neither sought recognition for their actions. In the weeks that followed, Earth underwent a transformation. Governments and private organizations pooled resources to develop new technologies based on Goliath's design. Engineers studied its targeting systems, propulsion mechanisms, and energy sources, adapting them for modern use. Factories once used to produce consumer goods were repurposed to build weapons and defense systems. For the first time in decades, humanity worked together as one, united by a common cause. Jacob and Lila played key roles in this effort, sharing their expertise and guiding the development of new prototypes. Though they were hailed as heroes, they remained humble, insisting that their actions were only part of a larger effort. "We didn't do this alone," Jacob said during a rare public appearance. "Every person who believed in Earth's strength helped turn the tide." Lila echoed his sentiment. "This isn't about us. It's about proving that humanity can rise to meet any challenge. Together, we're unstoppable." Their words resonated deeply, inspiring millions to contribute in whatever way they could. Teachers encouraged students to study science and engineering. Artists created works celebrating human ingenuity. Even children joined in, organizing fundraisers and writing letters to soldiers stationed in orbit. Meanwhile, tensions with the Zorathian Empire simmered beneath the surface. Though Admiral Vrax had retreated to regroup, Emperor Thalric refused to let the defeat go unanswered. Reports trickled in of increased activity near Zorathian borders, suggesting another attack was imminent. Humanity braced itself, knowing the enemy wouldn't hesitate to strike again. Diplomatic efforts were made to negotiate peace, but the Zorathians dismissed them outright. Kael Vorn, whose arrogance had been shattered by Earth's resistance, now advocated for caution. "We underestimated them once," he warned Thalric. If we rush into another battle without understanding their capabilities, we risk losing. Again, Thalric sneered, his patience wearing thin. Enough of your cowardice. Earth must be punished for their insolence. Prepare the fleet, we march on them within the month. As the threat of another invasion loomed, Earth prepared for war. Satellite networks were fortified, orbital defenses strengthened, and ground forces trained in advanced combat tactics. Every available resource was poured into ensuring the planet's survival. At the heart of these efforts was a new generation of weapons inspired by Goliath. Sleeker and more efficient, they represented humanity's determination to never be caught off guard again. Jacob and Lila watched these developments with pride, but also unease. They knew Earth was stronger now than it had ever been, but so too were the Zorathians. The upcoming battle would test everything they had built. On the eve of the expected attack, Jacob and Lila visited a small museum dedicated to Earth's defenders. Inside, a plaque honored their actions during the first battle. Beneath their names read a simple inscription. They believed in the strength of forgotten relics and proved that courage transcends time. Leela traced the words with her fingers, her eyes misty with emotion. Do you think we did enough? She asked quietly. Jacob placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze steady. We gave Earth a fighting chance. That's all anyone can ask for. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly above them, dotted with stars that seemed closer than ever before. Somewhere among those distant lights lay the Zorathian fleet, preparing to launch its assault. But Earth was ready. Its people had risen to the challenge, drawing strength from their past while looking boldly toward the future. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Jacob and Lila stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. They had fought for humanity once, and they would do so again. No matter the odds, no matter the cost, Earth would endure. And in doing so, it would prove to the galaxy that humanity was not just a relic of the past, but a force to be reckoned with in the present and beyond.